Good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today for the inaugural Victorian Global EdTech and Innovation Expo we are delivering in partnership with the State of Victoria. Before we begin formal proceedings, allow me to pause to acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognise their continuous unbroken connection to the land, waters and culture across the country. I pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I personally welcome any Indigenous people that are with us today. For our international visitors, allow me to briefly explain why we pause for this important acknowledgement at the beginning of Australian meetings. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were the first custodians of the land we call Australia. This relationship has never been broken. We begin our events by acknowledging the unique position of of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Australian culture and history. It is my great pleasure and honour to lead EduGrowth, Australia's EdTech and Innovation Industry Knowledge Hub. Through connection and collaboration, we accelerate Australia's EdTech ecosystem globally, and we welcome our international guests today who are going to hear from some incredible and amazing Australian and Victorian EdTech companies. EduGrowth exists because of the vision of our foundation partners, Charles Sturt University, Deakin University, Griffith University, La Trobe University, Monash University and Navitas. These organisations saw the role that Australia can play in reimagining education in a digital, borderless online world. We have an exciting program ahead of us today. Let's begin by hearing from Global Victoria, our partner today. Please welcome Stuart Bland.
Thanks, David. On behalf of the Victorian Government, I'd like to say how pleased I am to partner with EduGrowth on this initiative. It's great to see people dialing into our inaugural Victorian Global EdTech and Innovation Expo from all around the world. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional Aboriginal owners of country throughout Victoria, their ongoing connection to this land, and we pay our respects to their culture and their elders, past, present and future. Global Victoria is the trade agency of the Victorian Government. We open the world to Victorian businesses and welcome the business world to Victoria. We do this by building the skills and knowledge of Victorian businesses to grow on the international stage, promoting the state's world-class industry capabilities to international audiences, and leading the nation as the best city in Australia to study in. Our international network of over 20 Victorian government, trade and investment offices located in key export markets can open doors to contacts who can expand your horizons and help make your global ambitions a reality. The Victorian Government has outlined its objective to build Victoria as an EdTech and e-learning hub in its international education strategy. Melbourne, Victoria is a global thought leader in learning and assessment. It is also the centre for Australia's online program management sector and has a strong reputation for delivering high quality international education. Victoria has an exciting and diverse range of education technology companies. The Victorian EdTech sector is thriving and leading Australia in education innovation for administration systems, student management and learning management. As David mentioned, today we're going to hear from some of Victoria's thought leaders who are experts in EdTech and online learning, and also hear from a sample of Victoria's fantastic EdTech companies. It's great to have the opportunity to showcase some of Victoria's EdTech and online learning capabilities today, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks so much, Stuart. So my name is Zoe Moon and I'll be emceeing this session today. I am a Melbourne-based entrepreneur and I've spent the last 7 years or so in the edutech sector, growing Australian-based businesses and promoting the products as well as introducing international products into the Australian and broader APAC region. I'm now co-founder of Loopland. We will now hear from our guest thought leaders today. And it's my pleasure to introduce Andrew Smith and Dr. Sandy Heldsinger. So Andrew is CEO of Education Services Australia, a not-for-profit education technology company owned by all Australian education ministers. ESA develops and deploys national education infrastructure and resources and provides technology-based services to the education sector. Dr. Sandy Heldsinger is an academic and entrepreneur. As co-founder of Brightpath Assessments, Sandy is leading innovative assessment in Australian schools. Today, Andrew and Sandy will be having a conversation on engaging learners with new tools and assessment practices for K-12 schools. I'll now hand over to Andrew and Sandy.
Thank you, Zoe. Good morning, all.
Morning, everyone. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Sandy. Hi.
Great to be able to chat, and I think let's just get straight into it. I was thinking it's only 2 months ago that we were scrambling in Australia to start providing schools from education from a distance. And my reading of it is that by June, all schools will be back and will be up and open. So I'm intrigued to find out sort of, is this just an aberration that we've gone through, or do you think that we've actually had quite a significant shift in our thinking about how we deliver education?
I have no doubt that we've had a significant shift. This is the biggest and most significant change in education we've seen in living memory, and it's happened so quickly. I do think there is some risk that if we don't stop and pause and think about what we've learned from this experience, that it will just be an aberration, and a lot of people will perhaps throw up their hands and say, well, thank goodness that's over, and go back to some of their old practices. But that'd be a lost opportunity. What we've seen here is an enormous increase in teacher capability, something that we haven't seen again in living memory. Teachers weren't trained to teach this way. Very few teacher education courses would have a focus around remote learning in the way that teachers have had to and are continuing to have to deliver. But also we've got to remember our students. Our students weren't trained to learn this way. So I think there's a real opportunity here to have a look at what we can pick up from this uplifting capability and confidence, and then translate that into how we think about the way education technology products are used in classrooms across the country and across the globe. So we're certainly thinking very heavily about the sorts of things that we can learn from this that will help not only the implementation of EdTech in the classroom, but also the product design and a range of other things. So that's certainly from our perspective what we see as being a huge opportunity. But I'm interested to hear from your point of view as somebody who's in this space, what you've seen as well and what you think might come from this.
I think that well, from an assessment point of view, if I sort of take that because that's my field and that's what I've been thinking a lot about, I think actually assessment has proven to be the hard component of all of this. So we got up quickly, the different ways of delivering have worked well, but if we really want to be able to harness the potential of both online learning and assessment, we need to give more thought to assessment. And of course, assessment and evaluation is going to help us evaluate what the learning is going to be like, whether the learning is effective. So we could start doing some fantastic studies and building on previous research about online learning versus in-person learning. From an yeah, sorry, carry on, Andrew.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think you're right. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about assessment in a moment. But as I was thinking about the assessment side as you were talking, I think the other group that we've got to remember in this is parents as well. And I know thinking about parents and some of the challenges they've expressed with the students at home, and thinking about how they assess students' work and how do they know students are doing the right things. There's probably a new era in parental engagement that we can pick up out of this. We've now got parents who have a deeper understanding of what learning really is all about as a result of this experience, and how we engage them in their students' learning. There's opportunities to rethink that engagement and that support as well,
yeah.
I think.
Now, Andrew, I'd be intrigued to know, growing up outside of Australia, I always had such a romantic notion of the Royal Flying Doctor Service and then Schools of the Air. Do you know if Schools of the Air we can learn from that? It's a long history that they've been delivering education from a distance.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that in our distance education providers in Australia, given the distance they've got to cover, have been doing this kind of thing for years. Now, I think that I spoke to some people in one of the distance education schools just recently, and they were sort of shrugging their shoulders, sort of saying, yeah, this is what we do. And I think what I've seen around the country is different departments going to their distance education providers and asking them the questions about, how do you do this? How can we do this better? The timeline has been pretty short. It's been pretty frantic. So I'm not sure that we've been able to pick up as much as we would have liked from that experience. But I think, again, another opportunity out of this is to look at what our distance education providers have been doing and think about how that can be incorporated into education into the future. Because one of the things that is really important that we don't lose out of this is that we've got students who are now re-engaged in school in a way that they weren't. There's anecdotal evidence, very strong anecdotal evidence, that while some students have really struggled with moving from the classroom to the online environment, there are students who were not particularly engaged in school who've re-engaged because this environment is working for them. This suits their learning styles, it suits the challenges they may have in their lives. So borrowing from our distance education providers, borrowing from this experience, we might find another way of educating some of those students who are traditionally quite disengaged with the usual classroom environment. And again, this is where our ed technology companies can make a real difference in picking this up and turning it into the sorts of products and services that can really help these young people.
And what would ESA's role be going forward in this space and sort of giving the leadership that we need to coordinate and but my sense is when I speak to schools, they get a bit frustrated. There are many different products that they can choose from. Each one has a different sort of onboarding process. They don't really link up very well. What's ESA's vision in this space?
There's two things there, Sandy. The first one is around helping school leaders and teachers and parents to a lesser extent to make good choices. One of the difficult things that we find in schools is that people who are making these decisions are not always trained in how to understand what the best technology to use in their context is. So we're doing some work at the moment on how we can develop some frameworks and some professional learning opportunities to help schools make choices about what will be best and work best in their environment. And the other area we're doing quite a bit of work is around privacy and data security. We know that that's a real concern for parents and for school leaders. And so we're just piloting at the moment a national product assessment service where we can look at products against a standard set of privacy and security standards and give some advice back to systems and schools about the nature of the compliance. And the good thing about Australia is that we've got some pretty good privacy and data security laws in place, and we've got providers of products who are keen to comply. And just to give you a quick stat, when we ran that first pilot, we found that roughly 1 in 5 of the products didn't meet the standards in one way or another, which was a bit worrying to begin with. But every one of those providers and companies stepped up really quickly, wanted to understand what it was that they needed to do, got on with it, and within a couple of months, they were all compliant. So it's lifting the bar. And so we've got strong standards, we've got willing suppliers, and now it's about helping the teachers and the school leaders to make good choices.
Okay, so I know the other big piece of work that you're doing at ESA is developing the online formative assessment platform. Are you able to share a little bit with us sort of your vision and where you're up to in that work?
Sure, absolutely. And the first thing I'll say about that piece of work is that we have teachers at the centre of that. Teachers are driving that program. So we're running it from a national point of view with our colleagues at ACARA, the Curriculum Authority, and AITSL, so the teachers and school leaders body. But with teachers at the centre, what we're looking to develop at a national level is an ecosystem of assessment, but in a formative sense. So what is it that a student knows? What don't they know? What they should do next? And to have that working on a really intelligent framework that can then make recommendations for the types of resources or assessments that an individual student should do next to help them along their learning journey. So that's a really exciting national project. It's going to make an enormous difference in education in Australia. We're working through the alpha phase at the moment. And again, I think one of the great things about the approach that's being taken to that project is that it's not about building one tool to rule them all. This will become the tool that everybody's expected to use. It's being developed as an ecosystem. It's being developed so that products and services that are already in use in schools that meet a quality standard can be incorporated in that. So teachers and students can continue to work with what's familiar, but a teacher in particular at the end can get a consolidated report on the formative learning that's been happening for a young person, and some advice on what their next steps might be. And that advice is really about complementing what the expertise of the teacher. So we're working really closely with teachers. It's an incredibly exciting initiative, and it will be one that embraces the EdTech industry as we start to bring in the great ecosystem.
Okay, so I think that people listening, all those startups who are burning through cash and are working very hard, most probably had a minor heart attack when you said you're building the online platform, and they suddenly thought that they'd be competing with you. But it's far more reassuring that you're looking to harness all the great work out there and give teachers a unified way into the data and the products they want to use. Is that right?
Absolutely, and we recognise two things that are two really important principles here. Is one, that teachers are already familiar with a number of products. We want teachers and students, particularly teachers, to be able to continue to use the products they're using, provided they meet the quality standards. And as much as we've got some really clever people who work for us, not all the smart people work for us. People like yourself at Brightpath and ACR and others have worked in this space for a long time. We want to draw on and harness that expertise and experience, not try and create something to compete with it. That wouldn't help teachers and students at all.
Okay.
It certainly wouldn't help the industry.
No, I think that's really reassuring. Certainly as a business, it's reassuring. As a educator, I think it's fabulous that we're going to have something that's taking the best of all that's available, but then refining it so it's very accessible for teachers. So it's a very exciting product or project. So you've mentioned a little bit about the security, the data security, and obviously that's going to be a big part of this project. In terms of the assessment tools and that kind of thing, what are you looking for? What would be the standard that people need when offering assessment tools?
So one of the pieces of work that's happening at the moment, Sandy, is the development of learning progressions in numeracy and literacy. And those learning progressions will underpin the formative assessment ecosystem that we're developing. So one of the key things for people who are in this space in developing formative assessment tools will be to understand those learning progressions and understand how both their assessments or their resources can link and align to those learning progressions, because they'll essentially form the spine of the system, if you like. Now they're available now for people who are in this industry and looking at this space.
Yeah, I think they were published yesterday, were they? Or I got a message through that they've been published, yeah.
Absolutely. So people are hot off the press. The most up-to-date version of the learning progressions were published yesterday on the ACARA website. So for those who are not familiar, it's ACARA, the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority. Their website contains the learning progressions that are up to date. And as I say, people looking to be and considering being part of this national effort around formative assessment should start by understanding those learning progressions and how they are going to link to those with their own products.
Okay. I'm very excited by it, but obviously also feel that there are things that we need to get right. And as you've mentioned, there's great expertise in educational measurement in Australia. But I think if we can bring together psychometrics, what we know teachers really need to know, and then technology, and the further thing is build it on this platform, I think that we're in for a very exciting time, and we might actually get to the point where we're realizing the vision that we have for assessment. We've had for a while a fantastic vision, and you can see little, not little things, but you can see pockets of where we're really getting it right, and then big gaps for teachers. So I think this is going to be a fabulous way forward and with huge potential.
I think it is, and I think that as you say, we are very fortunate in Australia. We have expertise and we have experience in this space. People like yourself and the work you're doing at Brightpath, ACR's work, we've really got a solid foundation to build on as we develop this program. The next stage for people's information is that we will provide a report to ministers early next year that completes the alpha phase, and then we hope and expect to be going into development phase in the first half of next year. So it's very exciting. but we're taking our time and we're trying to get it right. And we really do want to build off that deep expertise that exists here in Australia and that deep history and knowledge that's here around high quality assessment.
Now, Andrew, it's not going to be often that startups and people working in the industry would have easy access to you. So any sort of suggestions on how they can engage in this project?
At this stage, the best thing to do would be to check the website. We've got it. It has its own website. This project, the Online Formative Assessment Initiative, is its name. If you Google that, you'll come up with the website, and you can track progress there. So you'll be able to see exactly what the vision is. You'll be able to track progress, and there's some contacts there who you can reach out to understand exactly how you might be able to engage over time. As I say, at this stage, we're very deep in at the alpha phase. So we'll move into beta next year, and that's when we'll really be looking to engage the industry a bit more broadly, I suspect. But at this stage, please go and have a look at the site, Online Formative Assessment Initiative, and you will get all the information you need about what's happening, plus the opportunity to ask questions and contact some of the people in our project team.
Fantastic, thanks. It's a little early, but I think, Zoe, this is most probably a good time for us to pass over for questions.
I think Zoe's there. I might begin actually, if you don't mind, with some questions. I'm really interested, Andrew, in this idea that Australia is a leader in distance education. And I'm wondering whether or not you have an insight as to the difference between a distance education delivery model and an online model, and what the similarities or differences might be.
Yeah, David, there's both. Just to start with some of the difference, was one of the things that we find, particularly in the School of the Air, which Sandy mentioned earlier, which is education providers who are providing education support to students who are in very remote locations. They might be living on large cattle stations or out in roadhouses out on the highway between Perth and Adelaide. For those who don't know Australia well, it's a long way across the Nullarbor Plain. And the School of the Air tend to still use very analogue mechanisms because they're tend to be teaching younger students, often primary school age. So they will bring the students in from time to time. They send out boxes of material with papers and pencils and all sorts of things. So it's quite an analogue model for the School of the Air because of the age group they're dealing with largely, and because of some of the challenges around connectivity. The distance education providers, however, have been for a number of years now at the leading edge of taking technologies and putting them into play. They tend to deal a bit more with the secondary students rather than primary. They tend to have a wider range of students, not always quite as remote. And they have been really at the cutting edge in terms of, as technology has become available, the distance education people have been picking that up, looking for ways to use it effectively, because they're the ones for whom it can make the biggest difference in the outcomes for the students they're supporting.
Just another question from me as well, and that is, I'm conscious that we're talking to an international audience today, and what I'm really interested in, if you think, wondering whether you have any thoughts about the export capability of Australia's skill in this market in distance and online education.
Yeah, I think there's huge potential there, David. I mean, one of the things that we have been very good at across Australia, and particularly in our EdTech industry, and I've had the good fortune to visit EdTech providers and industry groups across the world. We are solving for the problems across our industry. We are solving for the problems that are common and commonly faced by students and by systems. And our export capability and our capability to develop here in Australia is really strong. And it stands very well against what I've seen across the world. And I think that a couple of the sort of things that support that, and I will keep going on about this because it's really a topic close to my heart, and that is our data and security and privacy, data security and privacy capability. We've got very clever people who are doing some great development work. So, look, our products are world class, and our capacity to support markets offshore is something we've got great experience in.
And at the moment, are we getting offshore suppliers seeking that sort of support from places like Education Services? I know that Sandy has an export market, but I was wondering whether or not the SA has any sort of inbound requests like that. I don't know if Andrew's frozen or I've frozen.
No, I can see you, David.
Well, I think Andrew, we've lost Andrew for a second. Maybe we'll get him back in a minute. Whilst we wait for Andrew.
Yeah.
Oh, we just heard a bit of Andrew. I think we've lost you, Andrew, sorry. Oh, you're back now. Sorry, we missed your answer. Oh, I missed your answer. I don't know if other people did. You're back now.
No, look, David, I was just saying that we in our role, we often play a bit of a moderating role between the systems and the individual products that are coming in from overseas. As you can imagine, there is plenty of people looking to get into the Australian market, and we play a little bit of a moderating role, making sure that if they come through us, that they meet certain standards and so on before we make introductions. So we play a little bit of a moderating role in that respect.
So thank you so much, Dr. Sandy Heldsinger and Andrew Smith. It's been fantastic having you here this morning. I'm sure everyone found it really valuable to hear from you both.
Thank you. Thanks, Zoe. It's great.
All.
Really enjoyed chatting, Andrew. Thank you. And thanks, David, for the opportunity.
Thank you, David. Bye.